Well, good morning, everyone. It's good to have you with me. Uh, Andrew Fullen and Robert Mummy from Purdue University. Woo! We are here doing a short conference call discussion on how the Purdue University Ratio Christi chapter managed to move from, viable this last year at the start of this fall semester, August, viable to healthy in one semester. And actually, before that, we had kind of a rough start too, because we went through a reforming time with the chapter. The chapter never went out of existence. We were always affiliated with the university for quite some time and had done a number of Symposia Christis, but we were down to just one student leader willing to serve, and that was a freshman. And the university required two. Fortunately, I'd been leading a summer study, and we've been going through some of these booklets, True Way Tracks on apologetics themes, and I put the word out that we needed some student officers to keep the club going. And you guys are both privy to this conversation as well. And Spencer said, yeah, he could be the president, but nobody wanted to do that because they were just a summer Bible study, but they were all college students. And one grad student said, what do you need? And I said, a treasurer. And he goes, I'm a treasurer for three other organizations. His name was Austin. I'll be glad to be your treasurer. So it kept us able to reserve a room and so forth. But I know in this conversation that we don't want to touch the glory. We believe that God did it, and the, there's no silver bullet on these things unless the Lord builds a house. We labor in vain. But just for a quick kind of orientation to how InterVarsity, excuse me, I used to work with InterVarsity. Wake up, brain. Wake up, brain. I got to wake up my Ratio Christi, thoughtful Christianity brain. Um, Ratio Christi critiques these things. I don't know if you'll be able to read this or not. Let's see if we can get it up there. But you can see a forming chapter. Um, yeah, it could be forming for a lot of different reasons. All the seniors graduated, all potential leaders are gone, or reforming. But we went from viable in August. That's a recognized student organization. That's what RSO stands for. The average attendance around 12. Active student and volunteer leaders able to fill in the absence of a chapter directory and a chapter account open and funded, and moving the chapter to healthy. And that has some other criteria in there. An ACD is an assistant or associate chapter director, and one of them is an SM, that's a supported missionary. And Legatus Christi is a recognition we give to students for excelling in evangelism and growth as a disciple who integrates Christian apologetics. But Andy, I think I start with you, and any introductory background on how did the chapter, I mean, the student leaders, yourselves, what are some of the things that you recognize that were happening that led to the chapter being able to grow from viable to healthy in this first semester? I think other chapters are in a similar boat or stuck in a forming uh, pattern for a year or two or in a viable pattern and it can't seem to break out of it, that you might have some insights. So what are
Well, one of the things we did, we were just very intentional. I was forthright with the student leaders in the summer, and I laid out for them this is what the metrics are for RC and what the national has set, and here's where we are. You know, we're viable, um, but wouldn't it be great if we could get to this healthy stage? And do you think that's doable? And how can we make that happen? So part of it was just setting that vision very clearly with measurable goals. Hey, we want to be averaging at least 24 people. What do we have to do to get there? And getting the students excited about that was the first major step. And so then it became, okay, what are we going to do? Tabling for us was a big deal. So we said we're going to take that very seriously. We tabled twice a week, every week in the fall.
Some
which
Russia people may not know what tabling is. Maybe you could tell us what that is.
it's basically promoting your group with a table which has your resources. It's an opportunity to share about your group, and it's an opportunity to share about Christ. So it's very evangelistic sometimes. Sometimes it's a little bit more about promoting the group. Depends how you want to take it. Um, but for us, it was very much promoted as a discipleship opportunity to grow in your evangelism, so we encourage students to think about taking a step outside of their comfort zone, and talked about the excitement of tabling. So we talked about tabling in our weekly meetings, and we announced it. This is where we're going to be next week. Be there, and we would have 6 or 7 students show up at a time. Um, and all engaged in conversations at one time. Oftentimes, I mean, we'd have a lot of different conversations going at once. So it was very exciting, and so just trying to make that part of the culture was a big deal, and we did get people to attend meetings through that. So that was very helpful.
That's great. That's great. I think sometimes people think tabling, that's something that staff do, but not necessarily, or maybe the chapter president, but getting all hands on deck and sharing the vision right from the start and what the measurable metrics were for moving from one stage to the next. Um, all good stuff. Robert, do you have some things that you'd add?
Yeah. In addition to that, I think free pizza every week for 10 weeks at the meetings kept students coming back those first 10 weeks or so. With the tabling, I think the timing of how we started tabling before school started and then the first 2 days of school were really when students are looking to get involved and get connected. And we used maybe broad, more recruiting type of tabling questions, such as vote for faith or reason. And then whichever one they vote for, we're like, our club is the intersection of faith and reason. It's a great fit for you. And so
That's
there,
our logo. The
there it
intersection,
is.
the intersection of the boys there.
Yeah.
The
So I think
collegiate.
there are multiple factors and also just good weather and a convenient location where students could easily get there from campus also helped.
That's good. That
What
tabling business early in the semester, that's hard work. Sometimes it's hot out there in the hot sun, but you were very faithful to do that, and you as well, Andy.
It's invigorating though, if you get excited about it and you bring that excitement to the meeting. I would tell some stories now and then without giving away names of people, but hey, we had this conversation with so and so, and this is a little bit of what was said, and that gets students thinking about it. Oh, so that's what it's like. Oh, that would be pretty interesting to be a part of that conversation. So and I mean, we're apologists, right? So and evangelists. So what more? It's the best job in the world to be out there tabling is what lights our fuse. So uh, letting students see that can be
I think so too.
invigorating.
You know, I we have a guy, he's featured on our national page, I believe, Daniel Mizell. He's a grad student at Purdue who was an atheist that became a Christian over the course of a semester. And I can remember him at meetings and seeing him back when I was attending more regularly those meetings. And he would sit there with his arms crossed and a scowl on his face and like, yeah, prove it to me. But he had a friend or two that went. But over the course, his body language changed, and he became more. I can remember going to the meetings even more recently, and seeing people kind of isolated in the room where you would have your weekly meeting and just kind of sitting by themselves or maybe with another person. Sometimes I think science and tech schools like Purdue get a reputation for having more of a quote unquote geeky student, less, the fraternities and sororities may have the super energetic, extrovert, bubbly party people. These are all stereotypes, forgive me. But people are asking hard questions about science and philosophy and history and whether or not the Christian faith is a irrational leap of faith, just a self-authenticating existentialist choice that has no basis in fact or history or truth. That's usually a person that's thinking pretty deeply about things. How did you manage to get them out of the isolation thing at the meetings? My wife and I visited just a couple weeks ago, and she commented on how friendly the group was. I thought, yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, one thing I noticed that too, for students showing up half an hour early, sitting in the corners by themselves, and we started doing name tags with a greeter at the door who would ask a question and write their answer on the name tag. So students then had this conversation starter on their chest with like, here's my favorite this, and they could grease the wheels for conversations with other students, smoothing it, making it easier for them to just make some friends.
Yeah,
Great
Robert
idea.
was instrumental in that and helping build a community for our group. And that was one of the things we were also intentional about was uh, that we wanted people not just to come and get equipped, although obviously that's what we do. So we want them to know they're going to grow. If they come to our group, you will grow. But the other thing we wanted was to know that they're going to have friends, that we love each other and this is a community. And just little things like that, like little name tags and having someone like Robert going around and just kind of getting them talking made a humongous difference. So, emphasizing that was part of the intentionality, was emphasizing they'd have friends, emphasizing they'll grow, and then the other thing was that they're wanted. We want them there, and so pouring that into the student leaders that we don't want anyone to show up to our meeting and leave without somebody talking to them, and that it's on us as leaders, as student leaders and leaders, to make sure that doesn't happen. And so getting them to be intentional about that, knowing that's part of their job, is a big deal too, I think.
Really good. One of the things I noticed that at your call out meeting, which we call our first meeting of the year, that if I'm not mistaken, I believe that was this fall. Again, I wasn't as regular at the meeting. I was knocked out by a horrible fall where I had a double break of my ankle. I couldn't even drive with my right foot. But I do remember, I believe it was the call out or the first meeting this year. You had the perspective banners, about six of them, asking different apologetics question. How do you know there's a God? What is the human problem? Who is Jesus? What's your source for truth? And you had these banners set up in different places in the room, and it wasn't just you guys. It was a student leader at each kind of station or conversation station, and the group would kind of mix going to the different banner, take a turn, and then the student leader would ask questions and do a little introduction to how apologetics interfaces with that particular question. I thought that was really creative.
Getting leaders involved is really, really helpful. Getting students involved, even if they're not leaders, if they have certain gifts. I mean, some of our students aren't leaders, but they're brilliant and know apologetics. And so giving them opportunities to shine, that's what really is helpful, because it gets that they'll invite their friends. It gets students excited to see other students involved and they want to support each other. So that was a big deal. And that actually, that idea came out of um, trying to discover what the student leaders themselves like about RC. And as you know, Joe, I'm a chapter formation coach. And so I talk to a lot of chapter directors. And one of the questions I ask them is, what do your students like about RC?
Mhm.
What do they want RC to be? And a lot of people don't know. A lot of chapters don't have any idea really what, and haven't asked that question. It's really important to discover what the students like about your group and talk to them about that and what would they like it to be. And that gets them excited about the group. And if you can do that, that's going to be key, because really the key to growth is the students are inviting their friends. Um, that's the thing. Or they're doing the work, they're doing the outreach. They're the ones who are going to draw the peers.
That's great. Hey, I remember you talked the last time a little bit about the role of prayer, and that your weekly meeting wasn't the only place where the Velcro of a student could connect, but that mature Christians that come to the group to visit, to wonder about apologetics, may be looking for a inductive Bible study and offering that. Could you tell a little bit about either one of those, Robert or Andy? You take
Sure.
it.
We started the Ratio Christi Gospel of Mark Bible study the first Monday after our kickoff meeting in the fall. And we put around a sign-up sheet. That first meeting, about 15 students said, yeah, I'm interested in a Bible study. And we started it right away. And that's been really fruitful for students who wanted more relational connections and depth and accountability in reading the Bible. And I think it's been really helpful for giving kind of deeper relationships in the group.
Do you have a copy of one of those last? I think we talked about. I had, our study series. This is Church and State by Wayne Grudem. I studied on it. I used that for the election, but that's the Mark Inductive Bible Study that you are actually using with students, right, Robert? Excellent. That many
It is.
students. Interested.
Sorry, Joe, go ahead. I didn't mean to.
No, that many students were interested. I remember going through the Gospel of John, and I just thought, think apologetics with the Gospel of John. And you got chapter 1 with, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. You got the deity of Christ right out of the starting gate, and there's going to be pushback in the university about that. Chapter 2, you got a miracle. We go to a science school. Everything is explainable. Miracles are just coincidences or anomalies. There's nothing. God's not really intervening. And so there's pushback. And so as Christians, we have even the new birth in chapter 3. A lot of times people think Christian conversion is just basically being catechized into a new way of answering the questions and not necessarily a changed heart or a new birth of the presence of the Holy Spirit in the person's life that realizes they're a sinner needing forgiveness. But anyway, I love it here in the Gospel of Mark. I think that's great because it's probably the first gospel written. And yeah, just a little bit of a bunny trail on that. Andy, you were going to say something about that or about
Well, it's been very helpful to have that option for students because if you're going to defend it, you ought to know what it says. And so there are students who don't know the Bible very well, right? And so having that option for them, and even if they do know the Bible, just as a discipleship step, particularly at a place like a university, you got to be in the Word. And so it has been a thrill to see people grow through that experience. Robert's done a great job of leading that. You mentioned prayer too. That was another thing we were intentional about this semester, more so than in past semesters. This past fall, we wanted to be sure we were infusing prayer in our meetings. We pray at the beginning of our meetings, but particularly when we table. And so we made it a point to gather as a group before we begin tabling. We pray together as a group of tablers, right? And then we also have somebody who tables with us regular, and she's just a prayer warrior. She's a student, but she's a prayer warrior. And so she takes down the names of the people to whom we have interactions, and then she prays for them throughout the week as well. And she told me just the other day, God has reconnected her on campus with so many of those people. Just they happen to run into each other, and she has another opportunity. Very cool. So that we just started a prayer, a group meet thing for prayer requests and things like. So trying to infuse that more, just as a way to invite the Lord into this and to honor Him and recognize that, as you said at the beginning, this is not us at all. It's Him, and if He's not in it, then it isn't going to happen. But so that's
I'm glad you started that group meet for prayer. That's great. I remember a grad student was kicking that idea around a couple of years ago. I'm glad to see it that took off. I mentioned something about prayer, and I was thinking about all the stuff I brought today. The new Ratio Christi booklet. Actually, it's kind of our tract, and like as usual, when we do a tract, it's big. Is God there? Can God be known? And it's got these footnotes on it. I like that it starts with the creation and Kalam cosmological argument. Great stuff. But when you mentioned prayer, I was just realizing I forgot to bring my prop, and that was a T-shirt. I remember at the beginning of the year, I gave out this T-shirt to some tablers, and it had Ratio Christi at Purdue's logo on the sleeve, and then in great big bold print at the front, it said, "How can I pray for you?" And I'd worn one of these and gave them to some students at Purdue that were tabling, and I thought they're never going to wear these things. And came back the next week, and they were wearing them, and they were asking people how they could pray for them. And I thought, this is the mind and the heart, and the reasons, and and just care for students. had a student I got to talk to, and it puts wind in my sails to have these experiences. That was just under a cloud, and he didn't seem uncomfortable being at the table. I think he broke up with a girlfriend in India. It was his first semester in the USA, and I said to him, I said, "Hey, I'm wearing the shirt. How can I pray for you?" And he said, he told me these things about it. Things were straying with his parents in India and with his girlfriend he broke up with. And I just prayed for him. His countenance just changed so quickly. He was willing to take, I think you offered him, Andy, a Bible, a Gospel of John, well, a Bible. And he said, "Where should I start reading?" And I think you recommended the Gospel of John and bookmarked it with one of our meeting time things. And just, this is just so exciting to be involved in that kind of thing. And another story of tabling, this was inside at the Purdue Memorial Union. You had a survey that I think was fitting something that was coming up in the calendar year, might have been um, Halloween or Thanksgiving or something, but it was questions related to that theme that was current. And I was having a good conversation with somebody, but right next to me, you were sitting there and you were talking to an international student who was very engaged with you. Uh, uh, his name was Luis. He was from Colombia. I think he's still involved. Maybe one of you could tell a little story about his pilgrimage over the last summer and semester, if it wouldn't be betraying, a name or something. I don't think. Luis is very outgoing.
Luis is very excited about his testimony and has told me, "You have permission to tell anyone, anywhere, anytime." Because yeah, so he was an atheist, a doctoral student. We met him about a year ago, last November, and tabling, and had a great conversation. Talked with him for about an hour and a half at that, and from there he started coming to Ratio Christi meetings. Went to a Frank Turek event that we had in the following February, and that moved him from atheism to theism. That event, he said, had a radical impact on him. And then he ended up trusting Christ back in September, and he is on fire. He is tabling every time he can, multiple times a week. He'll be there, and we're discipling him now. It's so exciting to see the transformation that's happened in his life. And
He's done some teaching at the chapter for the whole group too, right? I
he,
think
he did
before that
he did teach a
September,
couple weeks ago.
I think before that September turning point, he was in the summer Bible study with Robert and I. And we went through, I don't know, it might have been the Gospel of John, but when we got done, he said, "I want to go through the book of Romans." I'm going, "Dude, you're not a Christian yet. You want to go through?" And then he said, "I want to go through First Peter." And he was just reading scripture and asking questions. And man, we
I'm
just
amazed at how well he knows scripture for as new as he is to the faith. But I mean, he's in it every day. He's in the word every day and very excited about his relationship with Jesus. It's very cool. It's very
Well, we're
exciting.
leaving out something. We wanted to go short and keep this brief, moving a chapter from viable to healthy. Either of you have any last words or something left out?
I would just add that kind of Andy's spirit or vibe is very welcoming and friendly, even to hostile questions. And he responds with this gentleness and respect to kind of harsh questions in the meeting or at tables that creates a culture that is one that, man, it's like, I want to be here. I want to be around this guy. I want to be around these people. I think is really admirable and part of what God's using.
You too, Robert. My wife said Robert is just perfect for Purdue, for your Texas A&M background. And I'm sorry, Andy, were you starting to say something?
Oh no, you're absolutely right. He's been a tremendous blessing. The only thing I was going to add was keep it fun. Remember, these are students and they want to have fun, and so building in games or icebreakers or things like that, or Bible trivia or something in the midst of all the teaching is good. Giving them a chance to interact with each other is good. So just try to remember to have, hence the pizza, right? And the time after the meeting just to gather and socialize is important. I guess the last thing I would say is, don't be afraid to vision cast what makes us as Ratio Christi so special as a campus ministry, and to just infuse into the students the importance of this ministry. That this ministry has the most important message on the campus. There's no more important message than what we have, I don't care what class they're taking. And so there is an importance to this, and there is meaning behind it. And if you can infuse that into the students, and they can get that, and that we do things that a lot of groups don't do. I mean, a lot of groups aren't tabling the way we are, doing evangelism, doing outreach. And so this is an opportunity for students to be a part of something different. It's a movement on campus.
Yeah, I remember just today before we started recording this message, you said that you're doing 2 sessions on LGBTQIA at Purdue, and I know we've done things to accentuate being pro-life and being created in the image of God. And a lot of people, through the power of political correctness over the years, have gotten a kind of Stockholm syndrome that you can't actually talk about these things if you want to climb or have any influence. But we've been doing this for a while, but there is something about doing it with gentleness and respect and having fun and enjoying the conversation and even the pushback sometimes. I want to remind you of these things. I think I didn't have the mature category up there the last time, but one of the things I've noticed that's been helpful is the third one under mature, which is where you're going next, is males and females influencing the group. Sometimes a science and philosophy oriented organization can be a little heavier on male leadership, but I have seen Ellie, and before her, a gal, Caliph,
And
and before her, Hannah,
yeah.
and others that have helped us to make this student group not just a men's club. And so when women come, they say, yeah, women are thoughtful too. Well, there's a huge organization called Women in Apologetics, and one of our former regional directors is involved in that, Anna Kitco. And it's just wonderful to see the way God uses different personalities and spiritual giftings and temperaments to reach different kinds of students, and then to introduce them to other students that have other gifts that help fill that out.
Well, you just hit something really important there, Joe. Discovering what the student's spiritual gift is very important. That's one of the things we also did maybe a year ago to kind of discover what, because a lot of students don't know what their spiritual gift is or gifts are, and so helping them discover that, and then how can we bring that to Ratio Christi? How can they serve RC in that way? And that gets them excited about being involved. So that's another good tip.
Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for being on this meeting on short notice, and hopefully we'll share this to the director's page, and other people can have comments and maybe add their own videos of things that their chapters have been through. I know that the chapter at Liberty University in Virginia has gone from Viable to Healthy this semester, and I know, Andrew, you've handed off a couple of different chapters to me that have gone from forming to Viable, and now the challenge is to get them from Viable to Healthy and on to mature. One of the big categories for that, in addition to just more people coming, is having some folks do a gap year with us or coming on staff. And these are just, it's vision casting, as you started with right from the very beginning. Well, I appreciate it. You can go ahead and stop the recording anytime you want, unless you have a final word or comment. And thanks again for being on the call. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.